Good morning, everybody. My name is Nathalie Paquet, and I will be your webinar moderator today. Welcome to this last 1010 webinar of this year. And today we are very pleased to give you a presentation on the adoption of EN standards by non-European countries. To this end, I have here with me my colleague Hervé Gauthier, who is the head of the unit International Cooperation at CCMC. Hervé, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Nathalie, and good morning all. It's my pleasure to welcome you to speak about the adoption of European standards by non-European countries. When speaking about non-European countries, we mainly cover those countries which do not have a member of CEN or CENELEC, and we will cover the affiliates of CEN and CENELEC and the partner standardization bodies, PSBs, but more briefly than other countries. So just to give you a flavor of what will be covered in this presentation, let me just give you the main webinar contents. We will start by providing you with the rationale for the dissemination of European standards for adoption by non-European countries. We will go through the applicable policy and principles that frame this process. We will also give you some tips on how to find more information by yourself if needed. We will go more in detail to review the different cases that can exist when we get requests for the adoption of European standards outside our membership, and provide you the information about the applicable contractual frameworks. And we will also view the full workflow of how a request is treated from the moment it arrives in our office. Eventually, we will provide you with some facts and figures dated from the third quarter of the year about the state of play in the adoption of European standards outside of the CEN and CENELEC membership. And we will finish by providing you with the future perspectives let's say the challenges, points we would like and we are trying to address in the coming month and years. So first, the rationale for the dissemination of European standards. Why do we endeavor to disseminate our standards for adoption? It starts with an observation that we are seeing today progressive elimination of the traditional barriers to trade. By traditional barriers to trade, we mean, for instance, tariffs and quotas, which have for a long period regulated international trade. We see that progress is achieved at multilateral level via the World Trade Organization, the WTO. And as an example, we can note that between 1948 and the year 1994, there were around 124 regional trade agreements, meaning involving more than one country, that were notified to the GATT, G-A-T-T, which was a predecessor of the WTO. 124 in a matter of 40 years. Since then, since 1994, there have been over 400 regional trade agreements that have been notified to the WTO. It's a huge increase, and that shows how much the traditional barriers to trade are progressively disappearing. We also observe and note a higher interdependence between economies, notably via the steady increase of the share of trade in relation to a country's gross domestic product. If we take the example of the 28 countries that compose the European Union today, if in 2004 export was representing 34% of their GDP, in 2012 they represented 43% of their GDP. This is a huge increase of the part of export and trade in the economic growth that we observe in our countries. We also observe the emergence of new concepts like the global value chains, meaning that production is more and more decoupled in a number of steps that can be carried out in different places. All this creates the need for a common language, and this common language helps working together. Standards represent this common language. They play the role of trade enablers, facilitating interoperability, compatibility, trust, compliance notably, and they support fair competition in global trade thanks to agreed common specifications. Another element is the fact that we note that the adoption and use of identical standards in different countries clearly supports technical alignment, regulatory convergence, and market access. This is a strong strategic objective of CEN and CENELEC to support free trade and a fair free trade. In order to do so, CEN and CENELEC first encourage all their non-European partners to adopt ISO and IEC standards whenever possible. This policy is strictly applied in Europe, where CEN has over 30% of its catalog composed of standards that are identical to ISO standards, and in the case of CENELEC, it's over 72% of standards that are identical to IEC standards. Indeed, there's not always a suitable ISO or IEC standards for everything. In these cases, CEN and CENELEC encourage the adoption of their homegrown standards. It's important to define what this means, homegrown standards. It means standards that are not identical to any ISO or IEC standards, because indeed CEN and CENELEC do not have any, they can only encourage to adopt ISO or IEC standards, but they do not hold the copyright on these deliverables. Let's now look at the policy. The policy governing the dissemination, sales, and copyright of CEN and CENELEC publications is a publicly available document, CEN-CENELEC Guide 10. You can easily find it on our website. Here you can have a look at where you can find it on our website. Now let's look at the content of this guide. What does it state? It clearly states that one of the main objectives of CEN and CENELEC and their members is the widest possible dissemination and use of their publications throughout Europe and the rest of the world. Indeed, the CEN-CENELEC Management Center and the members have complementary roles in meeting this objective. CEN and CENELEC do hold the copyright in all their respective publications, but the distribution, meaning the sale of European standards, is mainly ensured by their members. The CEN-CENELEC Management Center is, on its side, responsible for the dissemination of pure homegrown European standards on behalf of CEN and CENELEC. When I mean pure homegrown standards, it means the reference EN with the number. We do not talk here about the national adoptions of European standards, which are held and managed by our members. These standards can be disseminated for review in the work of a technical body of a third country national standardization body, when there is a clear intention to adopt that standard. It can be disseminated for identical adoption indeed, and that's the preferred solution for CEN and CENELEC. It can also be disseminated for adoption with deviations or reproduction when parts of an EN are included in a deliverable of a third country national standard body. Here in CEN-CENELEC Management Center, the International Cooperation Unit coordinates the dissemination of European standards to affiliates, partner standardization bodies, and third countries. Indeed, for that, we can liaise with other departments if needed. Let's note here that third countries are all those countries that are neither a member nor an affiliate or a PSB of CEN and CENELEC. The result is that any request for the dissemination of a European standard should be addressed to us via the following address, enadoptions@cencenelec.eu. In terms of principles, we also have to mention here that there are different rules applying to different relationships. The affiliates are the affiliation concept with CEN and CENELEC, framed by the CEN CENELEC Guide 12, is the closest status of relationship with CEN and CENELEC apart from the membership. Then we have the partner standardization body status, framed by CEN CENELEC Guide 13, and other third countries, national standardization bodies and national electrotechnical committees. The affiliates have the most direct access to CEN and CENELEC European standards. They have an automatic access and direct access to the full database of CEN and CENELEC standards. They can directly download the full text of CEN and CENELEC deliverables. On their side, the partner standardization bodies have automatic access to the CEN and CENELEC catalogs, meaning the full list of European standards developed by CEN and CENELEC, but they can only get the text of the European standards upon request for identical adoption. For any other country, it is upon request that we will provide European standards. For affiliates, there's no need for any license agreement for the adoption of European standard. This is part of the affiliate status package, I would say. For the partner standardization bodies, indeed, there's no need either for a specific agreement for the identical adoption of a European standard. For any other country, there is a need for such an agreement. Affiliates do notify directly the adoption of European standards in an IT tool provided by the CEN and CENELEC platforms. For partner standardization bodies, the reporting and notification go through the CEN CENELEC Management Center, as it is the case for other third countries. Reporting on sales is not required from affiliates, but it is from PSBs and third countries. Now let's have a look at the different types of agreement that frame the dissemination of European standards. For the review of a European standard in the technical work of a national standardization body outside the membership, there is a need to develop and sign a copyright declaration. For the adoption, be it identical or with minor deviation, of a European standard as a national standard, and even for reproduction purposes, there is a need to sign a license agreement that can take several shapes. Let's have a look at the rights and obligations associated with the review of European standards. This right is granted in order to provide a technical body outside of our membership the possibility to get access to the text of a European standard in order to confirm whether or not these standards could be adopted as a national standard in that country. As a result, the European standard can be circulated in a protected and watermarked version, and only to these experts that belong to the relevant technical body of the third country national standards body or national committee. There are obligations linked to that. The first one is to indicate an intended time frame for the confirmation of the decision to adopt the standard. The second main obligation is to notify that decision appropriately. And finally, any copy of the standard that has been distributed for review should be destroyed, be it electronic or paper version copies, after the end of the review work. Now, let's have a look at the rights and obligations associated with the adoption or reproduction of a European standard. The main right is the marketing and distribution, free of charge, of the national adoption on the national territory without any limitation. The main obligations linked to the adoption of a European standard are, first, to indicate contractually the intended time frame for the actual adoption. Second, to notify to CEN and CENELEC Management Center the effective adoption of the standard as a national standard. The withdrawal of conflicting standards on the national territory. The idea here is to facilitate trade and market access for European businesses and industry as much as for our partners' businesses and industry. As a result, we ask these countries to play the European game, because in Europe, all CEN and CENELEC members have to withdraw any conflicting standards when they adopt a European standard. We need them indeed to respect a certain number of formatting constraints that will help stakeholders trace back the national adoption of the European standard to the European standard itself. We also ask a complete reporting on sales of that standard to provide us with a feeling and a clear data about the actual diffusion and use of that standard. And in some cases, we can ask for royalties or lump sum payments when there are modifications brought to the standards prior to its adoption, or when the standard, the nationally adopted standard, is sold outside the country where it has been adopted. Looking at the workflow now, when we in CEN and CENELEC Management Center receive a request for a European standard, we first need to perform what we call an eligibility check and clarify the purpose of the request, because it's not always very clear. The eligibility check means that we ensure that the request is channeled via the national standard body or national electrotechnical committee of that country, member of ISO or IEC. Then we clarify the purpose. Is there a clear intention to adopt? Is it still unsure at the moment the request is made? If there is no certainty, then we favor the request of a European standard for review. This means that we develop a copyright declaration, we'll provide the European standard free of charge in a protected and watermarked version, and ask the partner country to notify the decision to adopt or not the European standard. When the purpose is clearly identified as the identical adoption of that European standard at national level, then we develop a license agreement that states that the adoption will be free of charge. We will ask the notification of the adoption of that standard, reporting, and of course the withdrawal of conflicting standards. When there is a request for an adoption with deviations or a request for the reproduction of parts of a European standard, then it gets more complicated. And here we have to mention the central role of the technical body that developed this European standard. We have to perform an assessment internally. This is done by the International Cooperation Unit in coordination with relevant colleagues, with experts belonging to the technical body that developed the standards, and with potentially the Joint Commercial Advisory Group of CEN and CENELEC. If we get feedback from experts that the deviations to be brought to the standard are only minor, linked to climate conditions, legal constraints, etc., and that they would not create technical barriers to trade, then we can go to a simple license agreement. If the deviations are substantial, if it might create technical barriers to trade, if it's about just reproducing copies or extracts of the European standard, then we are far more reluctant. And it's not the objective of the dissemination of European standards. So then we go for a commercial license agreement, including the payment of an upfront lump sum and royalties, potentially. Let's go to the facts and figures now, and that's the closing part of this presentation. Just to give you some basic information, we know that at the date of today, 38 countries have adopted European standards as national standards outside of the 33 countries where CEN and CENELEC have a member. Until now, we have registered over 87,000 adoptions of European standards in our databases. Here a look at the most popular European standards outside of Europe. 14 countries have adopted a European standard on cement, EN 197-1. 17 countries have adopted a CENELEC standard EN 50274 from the year 2002, covering low voltage issues. Now we can praise our champions, the champions of the adoption of European standards. First of them is Serbia, that has adopted, it's an affiliate of CEN and CENELEC, and it has adopted 95.9% of the full catalog of CEN and CENELEC standards. Albania is close to the 95% of the full catalog of CEN and CENELEC standards adopted in the country, and Bosnia and Herzegovina is around 85%. Now, when we look outside of our affiliates community, we can note that Kazakhstan has adopted 339 European standards, Saudi Arabia 171, and South Africa 173. Here you have the complete overview of the percentage of adoption of the CEN and CENELEC catalogs of European standards by all our affiliates. Outside of the affiliates, you here see the adoption of European standards, including a spread per sector that clearly indicates that building and civil engineering standards produced by CEN and CENELEC are extremely popular among countries adopting European standards. Pressure equipment and transport standards are also quite popular. And what's coming next? Next year, what we aim to do is to improve our strategy to address specific challenges. For instance, the adoption of European standards by regional standardization bodies outside of Europe. We already have developed one of such agreements in the Gulf region and are looking at the possibility to do so with other partner regions. We also aim at improving our IT tools, for instance, facilitating the online requests for the online treatment of the request for review of European standards and potentially the access online to the European standards for review. We also intend to make better and more use of the information that we gather via the reporting we get from our partners. We believe that it can represent extremely useful information for our members and stakeholders. For instance, we hope to produce very targeted information, sector relevant, that could indicate very good market access opportunities in a given country. And we would like ideally to complete the mapping by getting information on the level of adoption of ISO and IEC standards by our partners, because this can complete the information and provide a very important level of awareness on the level of technical alignment between Europe and its partner countries. Good to know also is that CEN and CENELEC can also adopt standards from other countries. This is actually foreseen by cooperation agreements we have with Russia and Japan. And even if not foreseen, we can try to find solutions. So if interested technical bodies of CEN and CENELEC are interested, they can contact the CEN CENELEC Management Center. As a recap, let's cover the key learning points. First choice for CEN and CENELEC, the adoption of ISO and IEC standards everywhere. When there is no suitable ISO and IEC solution, then CEN CENELEC encourage the identical adoption of their homegrown standards. The applicable rules are available in the CEN and CENELEC Guide 10, which can be found on our website. Who is in charge? The CEN and CENELEC Management Center. And here the email address that you can use to reach us. The possibilities existing are to review European standards, to adopt them, or to reproduce some extracts. And in each of these cases, as you could see, we have different contractual frameworks. What we aim to do in the future is to make more and better use of this information for the benefit of our stakeholders. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Hervé. Now we have received a series of questions. If there were general questions, I have answered directly to all participants, but bear with us. I will just read out the question that we have received for Hervé to answer. First of all, Khaled asked that they would like to receive an email for notifying the new standards from time to time, and also they need to know the standards that are still valid or not similar to the IC ones. Is there a mechanism foreseen from our sides to notify the third countries about the publication?
Actually, there are different possibilities for that. We do not, at this stage, we do not have a system in place to have an automatic notification about the update, replacement, withdrawal of a given European standard that has been adopted by our partners. However, the full catalog of CEN and CENELEC standards can be accessed online, and it's quite convenient to check this on our website.
Okay, thank you. Then we have a question about the direct adoption of ISO and IC documents that depend on the level of your participation in ISO and IC. And for African countries participating in ISO work or IC work, this participation remains low. So is there any specific program to support African countries financially and technically for their effective participation?
The support that we provide to our African partners, let me just state here that we have a memorandum of understanding in place both with the ASO and with AFSEC, which are the natural counterparts of CEN and CENELEC for the African continent. We have memoranda of understanding in place that help us provide information, organize study visits to support by sharing the European experience. We're also looking at additional possibilities to support the active involvement of African countries in ISO and IEC via the technical assistance programs that are managed by the European Commission. Indeed, our resources are limited, but we're looking at possibilities and very keen on engaging with ASO and AFSEC on exploring further possibilities to support the building of a strong quality infrastructure in Africa that would, as much as possible, align with international work carried out in ISO and IEC.
Thank you, Hervé. It was very clear. We have to close the webinar of today. I wish you all the very best for Christmas on behalf of all CCMC here and for the year to come. Have a restful holidays, Christmas break, and see you next year. Bye-bye.